Hi there, it's time for the Commodore 64 compilation review, and I imagine this is one that a lot of you have been looking forward to me reviewing. It's one of the most highly regarded compilations of the era, I believe, and it is the Magnificent 7, which was published by Ocean Software in 1987. It's got 7 games on it, plus 1 free, so actually 8 games, and it cost £9.95 for the cassette version. As I say, I believe this to be one of the most highly regarded compilations of the time, so let's take a look at it and see if it still stacks up after all these years. Let's first take a look at the packaging then, and it is a very distinctive packaging that many people will have seen back in the day. I had this when I was a kid and really enjoyed it, so there's no surprises on here in terms of the games. I've played them all before. Just to go through the games though, we've got Head Over Heels, Cobra, Short Circuit, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Arcanoid, Wizball, The Great Escape, and the free game included, supposedly, is Yie Ar Kung Fu. Obviously they really wanted to use this title, The Magnificent 7, but then decided that they should just give another game because, I guess because there's 2 tapes in there and 2 games on each side just seemed to make more sense. I don't really know the reasons why they didn't just stick to the 7, but I think everyone appreciated the extra game anyway. So anyway, that's the front of it. Nice design, a nice logo, and then on the spine you've got 7 hit games plus 1 free. And again on this end it says Computer Bonanza, all these hit games recorded on twin cassette or disc. Same thing on that side, and on this end has got the indication that it's for the Commodore 64 and the barcode and stuff like that. So moving on to the back, which is strangely the other way round. It's portrait rather than landscape, which is the front. Again, you've got the logo, you've got the pictures of all the boxes of the original games, and then it says every game's a smash hit. That's not entirely true. Some of these games definitely weren't, but you can see the overview of each game, so you've got a screenshot of each one, a description, and some superlatives given, like review comments and things like that. So for example, you've got Wizball, it got a Zap Sizzler, Amstrad Action, Master Game, I think it was a gold medal actually from Zap, but never mind. Sinclair User, Classic Crash Smash, things like that. Great Escape, it's got a comment there, the best arcade adventure and Newsfield Readers Award, and so on it goes. So I guess some of these were smash hits, but not on the Commodore 64. For example, Cobra was quite highly regarded on the Spectrum, I believe. So anyway, yeah, an overview of each game, nicely done. Again, it's going on that it says that Yie Ar Kung Fu is free, which is, I don't know why they did that, but there we are. Anyway, so that's the outside of the packaging. Let's take a look inside now. So here you can see the 2 cassettes in the nice sort of plastic casing that goes into these big box compilations most of the time. So you can see the order of the games on the cassettes completely different to the pictures on the front cover, but that's not entirely surprising. So there's the 2 cassettes, which are nicely done with a nice logo on one side. The other side's just blank though. So let's move on to the instructions, and they're hefty to say the least. Nice presentation. What's interesting though is that Yie Ar Kung Fu isn't featured on the front of the instruction manual, but the instructions for it are in there. As you can see here, it's one manual for all 3 systems that the compilation was released on. So you've got Spectrum, Amstrad and Commodore instructions there, and as you can see at the bottom there, Yie Ar Kung Fu is included. So it's strange that they didn't put it on the front of the cover, but just have a quick flick through. It doesn't really matter which computer these are for, but you can see you've got really comprehensive instructions for each game. You've got a full page for Arcanoid there, a full page for Cobra, 2 pages for The Great Escape, which is an adventure game and needs a bit more detail, all the moves for Yie Ar Kung Fu. So they've not skimped on the fact that it's a manual for a compilation. They've still got all the information that they would have had in the original manual for each of the games. So you've got like a couple of pages for Wizball, a couple of pages, in fact 4 or 5 pages for Head Over Heels. So yeah, really comprehensive instructions, loads of detail in there if you need them, and you do for some of these games because some of them aren't the most straightforward to play. So there we go, that's a look at the packaging, which I think is excellent. There's not really anything to complain about too much there. Let's now move on and look at some adverts for this well-known compilation. As with the majority of games and compilations released by Ocean, the Magnificent 7 was heavily advertised in the magazines of the time, and I found 3 different adverts for it. I believe this is the earliest of them, as it does look quite basic with the black background, and the shiny logo for the game isn't present either at this point. The wording says, "Just think, what if you could buy all these hit games in a special pack for the price of one? Wouldn't that be fantastic? And what if there's an extra free game included, say the best-selling martial arts simulation Yie Ar Kung Fu? Wouldn't that be sensational?" Well, now you can. It's called the Magnificent 7, and of course it's courtesy of Ocean. And this confirms the pricing of the compilation at $9.95 for the Commodore Spectrum or Amstrad cassette and $17.95 for a double disc version. And it also mentions that the pack was available from December the 1st, just in time for Christmas of course. The second advert is probably the one that you're most familiar with, and it repeats the wording from the first one to the letter, but obviously the design is much more attractive, bringing in the red and purple background that appeared on the packaging, along with a properly designed logo. The final advert probably came along later, when Ocean were using their advertising space to plug multiple compilations at once. Here you can see the Magnificent 7 in the centre of the page, along with Game Set and Match and Live Ammo, with the headline Kings of the Game Pack, and they rightly say that Game Set and Match has more games, Magnificent 7 has more thrills, while Live Ammo has more value, although with just 5 games for $9.95 it doesn't really offer the same value as the Magnificent 7, does it? Anyway, that's enough at looking at the adverts. Let's now move on and take a look at the 8 games that make up the Magnificent 7. Yeah, I know. And the first of those is Head Over Heels, which was originally released by Ocean in 1987, just a few months before this compilation came out in fact. Far away from our solar system lies the Blacktooth Empire, an evil empire with 4 worlds enslaved by the planet Blacktooth. All of the slave worlds bubble with unrest, but due to the oppressive nature of their rulers they never reach boiling point. They all lack a leader to draw the masses of population together. The peoples of the neighbouring stars are getting very worried about signs of military expansion from Blacktooth, and have sent a spy from the planet Freedom to see if he can push the slave planets into full rebellion by finding the crowns lost when Blacktooth took over. The creatures of Freedom are very strange in that they are formed from a pair of symbiotic animals that have adapted to operate either independently or to their mutual advantage. Head and Heels are their names, and both are highly trained spies. At the beginning of the game, Head and Heels have been captured, separated and imprisoned in the castle headquarters of Blacktooth. Your job is to get them both out of the castle and into the marketplace so that they can join together. From there the journey leads to Moonbase headquarters, where you'll have to decide whether to try and escape back to Freedom or be a true hero and teleport to one of the save planets to search for its lost crown. The populace of the Blacktooth Empire are so heavily oppressed that they would have to see all 4 of the slave planets revolt before the Blacktooth crown could cause an uprising. You control both characters and can switch between them at will as long as they have lives remaining. Head is descended from a breed of flying reptile and still has rudimentary wings that allow him to jump up to twice his own height and guide himself through the air. He's also capable of wielding a weapon that can be found in the castle. During Heels' evolution, the arms have totally disappeared while the legs have become very powerful. Heels can only jump his own height but can move very quickly. He's capable of picking up a bag that allows him to carry items between screens. Throughout the game you'll find a variety of environmental hazards that need to be negotiated, along with puzzles to solve. You'll also find a number of helpful items, including cuddly stuffed white rabbits that can give you extra lives or improve one of your skills, and also the bizarre reincarnation fish. This fish likes to be eaten and its prodigious memory remembers everything about you, so if you die at some later date you'll be reincarnated at the very place you ate the fish. This serves the purpose of being a checkpoint within the game. If you've been a subscriber to this channel for a while, then you'll know very well that I'm generally not a fan of these isometric 3D adventure games, but I don't think anyone would argue that Head Over Heels is one of the standout titles in that genre. The graphics may have the traditional single colour spectrum look that most of these games have, but they are absolutely gorgeous with cute cartoonish characters and a good range of different environments. The C64 version of the game also has great sound effects and several catchy tunes, proving that it's not just a lazy port from one of the other systems. The presentation is also excellent, with a ton of different game options and even the possibility of restarting a previous run from a checkpoint, which was pretty revolutionary at the time. The brown background on the title and options screen was a peculiar choice for this otherwise vibrant game though, and no doubt gave the Spectrum and Amstrad owners some ammunition in the playground. The game design is quirky and clever, with lots of challenging platforming along with mild puzzles to allow you to get collectibles or power-ups. It's really hard to master the control of the 2 characters though. Head's slow movement and Heel's pathetic jumping can lead to many deaths, which are often as a result of not being able to judge distances correctly in the 3D environment. Use of that isometric perspective has its usual flaws of course, such as not being able to see certain items that will kill you because they're hidden behind another object. After some practice, getting Head out of the castle is relatively easy, but trying to manoeuvre Heels through several tricky platforming sections with his awful jump is very difficult. After several attempts I gave up and still hadn't managed to unite the 2 characters. One annoying factor is that you don't share lives between them, instead having a set number each. This means you can be stuck with one of the 2, unable to make progress while the other is dead. I'm sure I could get much further in the game when I was a kid, but I just lost patience with some infuriating sections where it's too easy to lose lives cheaply due to inaccurate positioning or randomly moving enemies. In some places there are disappearing platforms that look exactly the same as ones that don't, which results in you losing lives without warning and makes the gameplay trial and error to some extent. Another issue is with the controls, as you use the same key for collecting items and jumping, and this can cause problems in some areas. I think this can be redefined, but the instructions do say it's necessary to have them mapped to the same control at some points, so I'm not sure this issue can be rectified. Head Over Heels was a game I definitely enjoyed when it was released, and I fully appreciate its status as a classic and beloved 8-bit game. Sadly, playing it again now was not as much fun as I remembered, and it's not really the type of game I enjoy playing these days. Next up we have Cobra, which was originally released by Ocean in 1986 and is an adaptation of the Sylvester Stallone action movie of the same name. As vigilante cop Marion Cobretti of the Zombie Squad, you must rescue top fashion model Ingrid Knudsen from an army of psychotic killers and the evil clutches of the Night Slasher. To be successful, you must advance through 3 scenes, completing the required mission in each. You must initially use your fists to defend yourself and collect weapons and ammunition along the way. A burgometer gives an indicator of your energy, which can be replenished by picking up hamburgers along the way. You start the mission with 4 lives and gain bonus lives at intervals of 10,000 points. At first glance, this run and gun game doesn't seem too bad. The graphics for the main character look pretty convincing, but him and all the enemies use the same legs, which look a little bit like they're wearing skin-tight lycra when they're not black. The backgrounds are pretty standard for this type of game, but do have some variety. The music is good, though it is quite sombre and doesn't really fit the action gameplay, while the sound effects are nothing special and are actually quite amusing at times. While initial impressions aren't too bad, once you start playing it all goes to pieces, as it's incredibly hard to make any progress and the game is also severely bugged. There's a motorbike that kills you almost as soon as the game starts and is almost impossible to avoid. Enemies fire at you constantly and it's hard to avoid their bullets and knives, or kill them with the fists you start with, so you can often lose all your lives within the first 60 seconds of playing. Jumping diagonally is hard to do when you're near the edge of background obstacles, and sometimes you'll miss platforms that you should land on or randomly materialise on other ones. Enemies frequently walk on platforms that don't exist, vanish halfway across the screen, or are sometimes replaced with a different sprite. There are innocent characters that will cause you to lose health if you kill them, but also seem to drain your health if they touch you. Even worse are the women with prams, which blow up if you make contact, but are too big to jump over unless you're on a platform above them. The enemy deaths are just them flashing, there's no effort being made to create proper death animations, and they can still kill you or drain health even after you've killed them. The collision detection is awful, you sometimes seem to have more lives than the status bar says, and you pick up ammo early on but never get a gun to use it with. Ocean was of course renowned for their movie adaptations, but in the earlier days they got it wrong more often than they got it right, and this is a prime example. Cobra is an unfinished, unplayable mess, and I have no desire to talk about it any further. The next game on the compilation is another movie adaptation, Short Circuit, originally published by Ocean in 1987 based on the 1986 film of the same name. Number 5 is Alive, a robot in the strategic artificially intelligent nuclear transport series has gone haywire. A million to 1 chance has resulted in a lightning bolt striking the automaton and bringing it consciousness. Now the scientist who put him together wants to take him apart again to find out what went wrong. The president of Nova Robotics wants to capture him before the weapons he is carrying kill millions of civilians, and the security chief wants to blow him up so he can get home in time for dinner. You play the role of number 5, you're alive and you aim to stay that way. The action is divided into 2 parts. In the first you must escape from the factory complex before anyone at Nova realises you're missing. Before you leave you must collect the hardware and software needed to activate your laser and jump mechanisms, and find the technical manual to help you build the decoy robot in the second part. You must solve puzzles and outwit the security guards, for only then can you leave the complex and make your bid for freedom. Points are awarded for the essential objects held at the completion of the section, and also for using certain objects and for time remaining at the end. In the second half of the game, once you've escaped, the chase begins. Pursued by security forces ordered to kill, and other Saint robots programmed to deactivate you, the odds look slim. Your only hope for survival is to build a decoy robot that will be destroyed in your place. You can only stun your pursuers, and causing death to living creatures will deplete your conscience energy. If your conscience level is totally drained, you'll automatically deactivate. If you manage to locate the van before the Nova helicopter arrives, you'll have your chance to create a dummy robot, fool all your adversaries and live happily ever after. In this section, points are gained for distance, disabling pursuit robots and guards, and for preserving the wildlife. This was another of Ocean's earlier movie adaptations, and they did do a better job here than they did with Cobra. The game has great presentation, with a brilliant recreation of the movie poster, an attractive title screen, high score table, and the option of playing the second section of the game in a practice mode. In-game, the graphics are really good, with an excellent recreation of number 5, well-drawn backgrounds and objects on the first stage, and nice landscapes and well-animated animals on the second. On the audio side, there are 3 very good SID tunes, brilliantly recreating the themes from the movie. The first stage is in essence a point-and-click style adventure game with a smart but slightly cumbersome interface for searching, using and other actions. It is initially hard work searching all the furniture, but the location of items doesn't change between games, so it does become easier when replaying. The slight isometric perspective doesn't help with judging the position for searches, and also makes it awkward when you're trying to get past other robots by repeatedly using the jump control. Progress in the game is unfortunately done through trial and error, and if you get it wrong then you get caught by the security guards and the game is over. This unfortunately makes it more annoying the deeper you get into the game, as you have to retrace your steps each time you restart. You can only carry 4 items and have to be careful which ones to drop and when, as some are needed if you need to backtrack, and while the in-game status panel is good, there is space for a list of items, which could have made the interface for using and dropping them easier. As I mentioned, the music recreates the movie themes really well, but on the first section it does get a bit much the more you play. The second stage can be accessed in practice mode from the menu, and that's the only way I've ever seen it, as I've never managed to complete the first one. It's a scrolling action game where you must try to escape, jumping or ducking wildlife and incapacitating robots and guards before they get you. Just as in the first stage, you only have 1 life and it's very easy to lose energy by hitting the animals. It's quite unfair at times when 2 come at you at once, and you often need to move slowly so that only 1 animal comes towards you at a time. This basically makes the sequence a memory and reactions test. Both levels look great and fit the theme of the movie quite well, but they are very hard and lots of replays are needed to make progress. Overall, the game offers a nice mix of genres and some excellent presentation, but is let down by the high difficulty level and any small mistake ending the game. The fourth game on the compilation is another licensed offering, but not a movie license. This one's licensing a musical artist. It's Frankie Goes to Hollywood, which was originally released in 1985. Frankie have sent you over 60 tasks in your journey from Mundainesville through to the Pleasure Dome, tasks ranging from the trivial to heroic feats of skill and intelligence. Whenever you complete these challenges, a bar chart will show your increase in the various elements of your personality, and pleasure points will be awarded. You begin your adventure devoid of personality in an environment of suburban boredom, but all may not be as it first appears. Your goal is to become a complete person, and to achieve this you must reach the top of the bar charts and achieve a score of 87,000 pleasure points. This combination awards you the minimum requirement to search for the special door, the door to the ultimate experience, the heart of the Pleasure Dome. While you're exploring Mundainesville, you will come across a body and must find out who the killer is. You must find all 23 clues which appear in windows, return to the scene of the crime and identify the killer. In your quest to form your personality, you must use what has been gleaned from everyday life to complete all the arcade elements. These elements are linked within the dome by a conduit, the corridors of power. This labyrinth enables you to move at will within the dome and connects with Mundainesville, though other routes may also be discovered. Inside the Pleasure Dome are a variety of games and puzzles which must all be completed to gain sufficient points to form your personality. This is a really unique and ambitious game with a variety of genres including adventure, puzzle and action, and a selection of different mini-games. I played it for over an hour whilst recording footage for this video and feel like I've barely scratched the surface. In the early stages there's a lot of exploration and backtracking which can get a bit boring, but once you get into the labyrinth to access the mini-games it becomes more fun. Those games are often confusing to begin with though, as you're thrown into them expected to know what each one is and how to play it, meaning you quickly have to grab the instructions to remind yourself. It would have been more user-friendly if each one had an introductory screen, but then I'm not sure user-friendliness is really in keeping with the bizarre theme of this game. Speaking of themes, the music in the game is great, recreating several Frankie tunes as you'd expect, especially in the labyrinth where the rendition of Two Tribes is instantly recognisable. One bugbear though is that in the adventure mode it's annoying that the music resets whenever you use an item, so you never really get to hear it all. The graphics are also pretty good, with nice animation on your character in particular, and well drawn backgrounds to represent the boredom of suburbia. The controls are also generally well implemented, though it is laborious to have to turn and face upwards to go through doors. This game is definitely an interesting and unique concept in many ways, but I do wonder if anyone ever actually completed it, even though there doesn't seem to be any way to die. I did eventually start to get bored with the endless wandering around, and then got stuck in a minigame not knowing how to get out. There are obviously a lot of tactics for success that you have to learn through replaying, and for the time this was released, it seems to offer a huge amount of longevity if you're willing to stick with it. The fifth game on the compilation is Arcanoid, a port of Taito's 1986 coin-op, which was released in 1987 under Ocean's Imagine branding. After the mothership Arkanoid was destroyed, a spacecraft Vaus scrambled away, only to be trapped in the void. You control the Vaus craft, which can be moved left or right. Using your skills, you must deflect an energy bolt which will gradually break down the walls confronting you. Certain coloured bricks must be hit more than once, and others are completely indestructible. Alien lifeforms descend at random to hinder you, but are eliminated on contact with either the energy bolt or the craft. Aiding you in your attempts are energy capsules which are hidden beneath certain bricks and released upon their destruction. Each capsule has a different power, which is denoted by the letter painted on its side. To complete the game, you must negotiate 32 levels and then confront the Dimension Changer, whom you must destroy in order to reverse time and resurrect the Arkanoid. This is a pretty standard port of the arcade game, with the graphics and sound mimicking the original well. The only minor gripe is that it can be slightly difficult to see the bat or enemies against some of the backgrounds due to the reduced colour palette of the C64 compared to the arcade hardware. It recreates the vertical screen orientation of the arcade game quite closely by putting the status panel on the right hand side of the screen, and the joystick control of your bat is pretty decent, with the game also supporting mouse or paddles if you had them. The ball mechanics are good, but of course you'll get the usual issues with mistiming connection with the edge of the bat. That never feels unfair though, it's just the nature of this type of game. I did however find the collision detection a little off when collecting power-ups, as you can miss them if the pod's not dead centre above the bat. I also never got the laser power-up during 3 plays of the game, but I'm not sure if that was a genuine omission or just bad luck. I don't really have any more to say about this one. Everyone knows what Arcanoid is about, and this is a solid enough conversion of a game that I personally don't have much love for. If you're a fan of this genre then it will do the job, but it's not what I'd call an outstanding game in the first place. It's that time again where I say thank you to all my channel members, whose names you can see here in my Supporters Hall of Fame. If you're enjoying this video and would like to join these fine folks and support my efforts, why not become a member yourself? For a monthly fee starting from just 99p, you can get access to the special membership perks shown on screen, and more besides. If you're interested, then please click on the join button below this video for more information. If you're not able to commit to a monthly contribution, but would still like to support my channel, then you could also give a super thanks. This one-off donation gives you a highlighted comment on whichever video you choose to click the button on, and anyone doing this will also get a shout out from me on a subsequent video. The super thanks button can be found below every video I produce. Next up is the classic Wizball, which was originally released by Ocean earlier in 1987. I'm sure this game needs no introduction for most people, but in the unlikely event you've never played it, I'll give you an overview anyway. For many years, Wiz and his fantastic cat lived happily in a brightly coloured Wiz world. All was not well, however, as the evil Zark and his horrible sprites have moved in to render all landscapes drab and grey. You must jump into your transporter and with the help of your faithful servant Catalite, restore Wizworld to its former glory. The landscapes in Wizworld are comprised of 3 colours each. Your objective is to restore these original colours by shooting the red, green and blue colour bubbles and then using the cat to collect the droplets of chemicals as they fall to the ground. Collected droplets will be stored in the cauldrons displayed at the bottom of the screen, until such time as you have enough of each colour to make the target colour displayed in the cauldron to the far right. When certain aliens are killed, they will deposit a green pearl which will remain stationary on the screen. If Whisball picks this up, the first icon on the top of the screen will glow, indicating that Wiz has the option to select the feature represented on the icon. If you want to select another feature, then you must collect more pearls until the icon you want is glowing. To complete a level, you must colour in all 3 shades of grey, darkest first, and after each type of colour is completed there's a bonus stage where Wiz can earn points, power-ups and even extra lives if he lasts long enough. After the bonus stage, Wiz enters the Wiz Lab and is given a perk by his guardian angel. You may select one weapon or control which will be magically endowed upon all subsequent Wizballs from that point onwards.
I've mentioned it in previous videos, but if you've not heard me say it before, Wizball is my all-time favourite game on the Commodore 64. For me, it's the epitome of the imaginative games that came from the 8-bit computer era, with an outlandish and original game idea that takes influence from Nemesis-style horizontal shooters, but gives it a unique twist to create a whole different type of game. The graphics are fantastic, from the iconic Wiz and Catalite to a variety of interesting enemies and some brilliantly drawn backgrounds that only get better as you begin to restore their colour. The sound effects are great too, and Martin Galway's music on the title and bonus stages is sublime. The game has an unusual difficulty curve in that it starts off quite hard until you get to grips with the controls, but gets easier and more rewarding the more you play. That said, the difficulty does eventually ramp up later on when the colour droplets start shooting back at you. Once you're powered up and get into it, this is a near perfect game, and the feeling of collecting all 3 colours to complete a level for the first time remains one of gaming's best moments for me. It also offers a brilliant 2-player co-op experience, and one of my most vivid memories of playing this game in the 80s was spending a rainy day during the school holidays completing the game with my friend. I've actually never completed it single player, but I still love to play it, and with the refined programming that has no glitches or bugs, there's nothing stopping you from improving and getting a feeling of progression as you play more. Whisball is quite simply a masterpiece, and if you've never taken the time to really get into it, switch off this video now and give it a go. The final of the 7 games that give this compilation its title is The Great Escape, which was originally published by Ocean in 1986. It shares the name of the classic 1963 movie, but is not an officially licensed adaptation. The year is 1942, the place Germany. War has broken out and you've been captured and placed in a high-security prisoner of war camp. Victory may be far away, so it's your duty to escape, but this will not be easy. It will take careful planning and much patience, culminating in a skillful and resourceful implementation. In the camp you are closely guarded, and while you follow the daily routine you'll need to slip away unnoticed and collect tools and materials necessary for your chosen escape route. There are many avenues of escape, some difficult, all certainly dangerous, and each one requiring different skills or equipment. You control the hero by joystick or keyboard, putting in several patterns of behaviour. If the on-screen morale indicator is green, you're able to follow the camp routine automatically, and you'll only diverge from this path by taking over the controls. If you wander too far out of bounds, the morale indicator will turn red. Now you're liable for arrest and have total control. You can drop and pick up objects that you find in the camp, but can only carry 2 objects at any one time. Objects can be hidden in various places around the camp, but any that are found by the guards or commandant, or that you're carrying when captured, will be confiscated. If you're spotted while on an escape, you'll have 2 choices, either to make a run for it or surrender. Once caught, you'll lose any objects you're carrying, camp security stepped up, and you'll also be sent to solitary confinement for a short time. Messages will appear on screen, keeping you fully informed of all news events within the camp, such as the discovery by guards of hidden items and the dropping of Red Cross parcels that increase morale when collected. Here we have what is probably considered one of the best isometric 3D adventure games on the C64, along with Head Over Heels of course, which I covered earlier. Again, I'm not really a fan of this style of game though, so my opinion is going to differ from that of a lot of people. The game's Spectrum origins are pretty obvious, and the black and white graphics might have been considered stylish at the time, but boy are they ugly on the Commodore. You can barely distinguish between your character, the other POWs and prison guards, which makes it quite annoying when there are several on screen. It may not have been possible on the Spectrum, but surely they could have given the enemies and NPCs different colours on this version. The scrolling is jerky too, which is another thing that could have been improved for this version. There are only some very basic sound effects and no music, which is a shame because the C64 is obviously well capable of a SID soundtrack that would have added some atmosphere to the game. I do love the idea of the game being an early example of a semi-open world where you can play your own way to some extent. The fact that it will autoplay the more mundane day-to-day aspects is also really smart. Unfortunately, that's where my appreciation ends. Movement of the player character is slow and awkward. The joystick allows for multiple positions per direction, which should make movement more intuitive, yet somehow it just makes it more confusing and I often found myself walking the wrong way. The roll call and breakfast routines that occur each day just take too long, despite you being able to relinquish control to the computer, and I feel a speed up option for those sections would have been a massive improvement. You also need a lot of patience to achieve anything rewarding in the game, and I just found progress to be too slow and boring to make perseverance worthwhile. I played for about 20 minutes and got virtually nowhere other than hiding a couple of objects in a tunnel. In essence, I do think this game is a great concept, but it's just not for me, and of course the isometric style and poor graphics don't help. I didn't have the patience for it when I was a kid, and I definitely don't have it now, but I do understand why some people rate it so highly. The eighth and final game in the Magnificent Seven is the supposedly free bonus game Yie Ar Kung Fu, which was originally published in 1985 in Ocean's Imagine packaging. This conversion of the Konami arcade game features Oolong in his attempt to become a grandmaster in the ancient skills of Kung Fu. To achieve this, you must defeat a variety of opponents, each more deadly than the last. They're armed with differing skills and weapons and must be overcome with a combination of 16 different attack moves. This is without doubt one of my favourite one-on-one fighting games from that simpler time before Street Fighter 2, where games didn't have to have combos, projectiles and special moves that I could never perform. This game was pretty influential though, as while it was single player and you could only play as one character yourself, it was one of the earliest games to feature a variety of different characters to face off against, some of which had weapons or projectiles. It also has fast-paced action, a good moveset, charming graphics and a memorable background tune. The C64 conversion is excellent, with the graphics and sound being very close to the arcade original. All but one of the enemies made it into this version along with both backdrops, and the action is just as fast and furious. In retrospect, you'd have to say there are some gameplay flaws, as most matches see you resort to doing leg sweeps over and over, and a couple of the opponents are infuriating as they can trap you in an infinite loop of hits that leaves you defeated in a matter of seconds. In all honesty though, the arcade version had those flaws to some extent too. I played this game to death when I was a teenager and could usually reach the final enemy, Blues, but found myself repeatedly defeated by him. Eventually I got so annoyed that I whacked the handle of my Quickshot 2 joystick so hard that it broke clean off. Nevertheless, it's still a great port of the arcade game that offers a stern challenge and always gives me fond if slightly angry memories. There we go then, those were the 8 games that made up the Magnificent Seven, and there's no doubt this compilation was hugely appealing at the time it was released, with an excellent variety of genres and some games with real depth. You got 2 uniquely original games, 2 conversions of popular arcade games, arguably the 2 best isometric adventure games on the system, and 2 movie adaptations from the period where, to be honest, Ocean was still trying to work out what made a good one. They aren't all magnificent, but with one exception, every game offered something worthwhile to the majority of players, and the overall presentation of the package was appealing too. The question is though, will this lineup of games be good enough to trouble the top of my compilation chart? As always, I'll begin by rating each game individually before giving an overall compilation score. Head Over Heels is undoubtedly one of the best examples of the isometric adventure genre, packed with charm, character and originality, but it still retains some of the issues that every game of this type has. I used to enjoy it and I wanted to love it when playing it again, but I just cannot get on with this genre, so I'm going to give it a score of 7 out of 10. In my opinion, Cobra is one of Stallone's worst films, and fittingly this is one of the worst of Ocean's movie adaptations. The high difficulty level and innumerable bugs make for a miserable experience, and this is by far the worst game on the compilation, and I'm scoring it 3. As for Short Circuit, unlike Cobra, this movie adaptation is well programmed and impresses on the visual and audio fronts. The issue is that the gameplay is very challenging and there's no margin for error, which will eventually lead to you turning it off out of frustration. I'm going to score this one 6 out of 10. Frankie Goes to Hollywood is an incredibly ambitious and unique idea for its time that is more like an art project than an actual game. You'll probably never complete it and it can get tedious at times, but there's so much to experience that you can't help but be impressed. This one's getting 8 out of 10 from me. Arcanoid is a solid conversion of the unspectacular Taito arcade game. Nothing more to say on this one other than I'm going to give it a score of 7. Wizball is my all-time favourite C64 game, packed with originality, quality and action, and it's arguably worth the cost of the compilation on its own. Unsurprisingly, I'm giving this one 10 out of 10. The Great Escape is a fantastic idea that unfortunately falls down for me due to the slow pace and that pesky isometric perspective. I do think it's a good game in essence, it's just not a good game for me, so I'm going to give it 5 out of 10. And finally, Yie Ar Kung Fu is an excellent conversion of Konami's influential arcade game, which I still remember fondly despite the joystick smashing rage. For a supposedly free bonus game, this is actually the second best one in the pack for me, and it gets 8 out of 10. Moving on to the overall compilation rating then, and firstly the packaging. Well, this is a typically polished big box compilation from Ocean, with attractive design and highly detailed instructions. You could argue that providing 8 games on 2 cassettes wasn't ideal, but it was fairly standard practice at this point, so I'm not marking it down for that, and I'm scoring it 9 out of 10. The average for the 8 games comes out at 6.75, and that just leaves value for money. At $9.95 for 8 games, this works out about £1.25 per game. Even discounting the abysmal Cobra, it still offered fantastic value, and the presence of big hitters like Wizball and Head Over Heels just months after they'd been originally released made it well worth the asking price even without the other 5 games, all of which are worth your time to some extent. Consequently, I have no option but to give this 10 out of 10 for value for money, and that means that the overall score for the Magnificent 7 comes out at 79%. Considering how high profile this compilation was, you'd expect there had been plenty of reviews of it in the magazine at the time, but I could only find 2. Let's take a look at them now, and the first is from the 1987 Zap Christmas Special, which has a roundup of all the latest compilations, just as it had in previous festive editions. As usual, each game in the compilation gets a short write-up, and for Head Over Heels it says incredibly addictive isometric perspective arcade adventure of epic proportions. Can't really argue with that too much. For Whisball it says sensible software's sizzling surreal shoot 'em up, lots of alliteration there but not really any kind of review, but I think they're saying it's good. For Arcanoid it says a great conversion of the Breakout arcade variant with plenty of polish and playability. Again, can't really argue with that even though I'm not really a fan of the game itself. For The Great Escape it says see live ammo for details, and that's referring to a review of another Ocean compilation earlier in this section, where it says Great Escape is an enjoyable isometric perspective wartime romp through a prison camp. Back at the Magnificent 7 review it says Frankie Goes to Hollywood is captivating pop art action featuring a variety of game styles. Again, not really much critique of that game, but it is factually accurate. For Cobra it says a pathetic game of the film, inept in every sense of the word, and I couldn't agree more with that. And for Short Circuit it says a strange choice for a film tie-in which is lacklustre and unexciting. I think that's a little bit unfair, but it does have its problems. And finally for Yie Ar Kung Fu it says simple beat 'em up action from the arcades, which again is factually accurate without really saying much about what they think of the game. Overall though, they give the compilation 91%, saying it's more like a very competent 8, 5 greats and 3 not so greats, but still deserving of a place in the software collection. And while I didn't rate it quite as highly as that, I don't disagree with those comments at all. The second review comes from the January 1988 issue of Ace magazine, which again features a roundup of all the latest compilations, but this time these are cross-platform reviews. The review of the Magnificent 7 begins by saying not 7 but 8 games in this action collection. Which one's the free game? Answers please on a postcard. Well, it's pretty obvious when you look at the front cover, isn't it? The roundup of the games on the compilation is much more in-depth than the Zap review, so I'm just going to pick out a few select comments. For Head Over Heels it says nothing terribly remarkable or new in terms of the presentation or style, but what a load of game it packs. Witty sound and graphics combined with the fiendish puzzles to capture the attention of the most avid arcade adventurer. While I'm not super keen on the game myself, I don't disagree with those comments. For Arcanoid it just says it's one of the best examples of the genre, and that's fair enough, and it begins the overview of Wizball by saying a first-rate game on the Commodore from a new programming partnership that lost out somewhat in the transfer to the Z80. Basically what they're saying is the C64 version's the best. Beyond that introduction they don't really offer much critique of the game though. For Short Circuit they say it's great fun on the Amstrad, a little flat on the Spectrum and less fun still on the Commodore. Strange how widely the 3 versions differ in appeal. So that makes it sound like the C64 version was probably the worst. And it's a similar story for Cobra. It says the well-playable Spectrum version is full of humour and added touches, while the Amstrad version is a little too easy, and the Commodore Cobra is more of a slow worm than a snake. It then says Frankie Goes to Hollywood is an essential part of anyone's software collection, if only because it's so different, and I definitely agree with that. And finally, for Yie Ar Kung Fu, it simply says great fun for fight freaks. The one game that's missing from this roundup is The Great Escape, and again that's because they reviewed it earlier as part of the Live Ammo compilation, where they said it's a challenging arcade adventure with a novel presentation. What's slightly disappointing about this review is that unlike the other compilations in this feature, there's no final verdict about the compilation for the Magnificent 7, so there we go, that's all you're getting from this review, but in essence I think it's pretty similar to the Zap one and my own feelings. As usual, let's bring this episode to a close by looking at where the Magnificent 7 has landed in my compilation league table. And in the full price compilation rankings, it's gone in at 3rd place with its 79%, just 1% behind another Ocean compilation, We Are the Champions. It's essentially lost out there because it's got more games and the average rating for those 8 games is slightly lower, but to be honest, I'd probably rather have picked up the Magnificent 7 than We Are the Champions back in the day. Moving on to the combined league table that brings in the budget compilations as well, as you'd expect, it's no different. The Magnificent 7 goes in at 3rd place on this one too. That about does it for this video then, other than for me to ask you what you thought of the Magnificent 7. If you've got any thoughts about any of the 8 games featured in the compilation, or the compilation as a whole, then please let me know in the video comments. And if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like. At the time of recording this video, I'm just about to go on a 3-week holiday to Australia and New Zealand, so it's going to be a while before the next edition of this series comes along. But in the meantime, there'll be plenty of other retro gaming content on this channel, so please stay tuned. Thanks very much for watching this video, and until the next time, see ya!